and TV production is in Ontario. We've expanded our studio space. We've built virtual production sets, Canada's largest backlot, and an unparalleled workforce. Our Ontario green screen program ensures a more sustainable industry. We are Ontario, and we're ready to roll.
Filmmaking and good filmmaking requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage.
Stories. That is the foundation of what we do as artists, just stories.
If more people who look like us and think like us are in positions of power, that is a cause for optimism.
It's very, very important that we put the stories in the hands of the people who own those stories.
And if it wasn't for Toronto, actually, I would not be here talking to Toronto.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival's Industry Conference. My name is Peter Kaplowski. I am the programmer with the Midnight Madness section at the festival, and maybe you're surprised to see me at the Industry Conference, but let me tell you, the filmmaker that we are going to be hearing from today makes some of the wildest and most wonderful movies in existence, and I am so excited to be here. But to begin, I would like to encourage us all to reflect on the land that you are on and its history. TIFF and Glenn Gould Studio are located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We are grateful to work on this land and to bring the work of Indigenous artists to our audience. But to help kick off this session, please join me in welcoming Dave Forget, National Executive Director of the Directors Guild of Canada, to say a few words.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone here. Back to doing these things in person. Good morning, all. The Directors Guild of Canada is proud to support today's session with groundbreaking filmmaker SS Rajamouli. In over 20 years as a director, our guest has carved out a celebrated career, including 3 of the top 5 grossing films in the history of Indian cinema. The cultural and commercial impact of this accomplishment, however, cannot be truly understood without some cultural context. You see, Mr. Rajamouli's blockbuster films are not shot in either of India's official languages, English or Hindi, but in Telugu, one of India's so-called classical languages. These pre-colonial languages with a legal status similar to that established under Canada's Indigenous Languages Act. Imagine that for a moment. 3 of the 5 highest grossing films in the history of Canada, all from the same director, all filmed in an Indigenous language. Consider the significance that holds, both for cinema in India and for what it tells us is possible for cinema worldwide. And now, Mr. Rajamouli's latest Rise, Roar, Revolt, a spectacular film, better known as RRR, has reached a new milestone, becoming a global phenomenon and demonstrating the rising worldwide demand for more diverse content. I don't need to tell you, these are the same issues we're facing here in Canada. I don't need to tell you that because many of you received a card on your way in, advertising directors.ca, the DGC's website, helping international decision makers hire Canadian directors and promoting the DGC Census, our first industry-wide pan-Canadian voluntary self-ID program. If you didn't get the card, it looks like this, very groovy. They'll be handing them out on the way out. So wishing you a great talk. Thank you for coming out. Bon festival. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter.
And before we continue, I'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, Visa, and Bulgari, our major industry supporters, the Telefilm Canada, Ontario Crates, and our media partner, The Hollywood Reporter, for supporting the Visionaries strand. This session is presented by the National Film Development Corporation of India and is supported by the Directors Guild of Canada. We're going to get to the main event in just a moment. It is my pleasure to welcome SS Rajamouli to the stage. We are honored to have him here I've been a fan of Indian cinema for the past decade and have constantly gone to the diaspora cinemas like the Albion and the York Mills, and every weekend I just discover incredible movies. I feel like back in high school when I was watching John Woo movies or Choi Hart films for the first time, and those films changed action cinema and epic cinema forever, and I really feel like that's what's happening in India right now, and it is exhilarating and so exciting, and I can't wait for you all to meet Mr. Rajamouli. Moderating the conversation, though, is Mr. Josh Hurtado, the president and founder of Potente Films. Josh is someone who has been tirelessly working on illuminating and championing Indian cinema. I feel like he was crucial to being one of the first people to, in the West, especially in the Western press, to really begin writing seriously about Indian films on the internet and spreading the word. It's where I first heard of Rajamouli's work, and it's my profound pleasure to welcome Josh Hurtado to the stage for the final introduction.
Thank you for that, Peter. I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to speak with SS Rajamouli. If you don't know who he is, which I find would be unusual these days, he's everywhere. He is a veteran filmmaker. He's been working, as David said, for the last 20 years. But it's only been in the last 6 or 7 years that his work has started to spread outside of the Indian diaspora to more mainstream Western audiences, which is, I think, phenomenal and really speaks to his particular talent. I would like to sort of get to it. So if we can bring Mr. SS Rajamouli out, we can go ahead and get started, and you can listen to the guy you came here for. Thank you so much for coming. This is a huge deal for all of us.
The pleasure is all mine. So happy to be here.
So I think before we get into your current success, which is tremendous, and we will definitely talk about, I think it's important for people to understand sort of your origin story, like where you came from and how you got from your beginnings to being this sort of global phenomenon at this point. And so let's first talk about the film industry that you come from and that you were raised around, the Telugu language film industry. There's been a lot of back and forth, not really back and forth, but people have talked about the Bollywood sensation RRR, which we all know, if you're in this room, most likely that is a misnomer for this particular film. But we've also sort of spoken about the fact that it's not really a Tollywood film either, but that is where you got your start. So would you kind of explain to the people here what Tollywood means to you?
Oh,
we'll get away from it, I promise. I want to start this way.
India is a country of many languages, and we have many different film industries speaking different languages. Most of the people know only about Bollywood, which is Hindi film industry. And I come from Telugu film industry, which is spoken mainly in 2 states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. I mean, in my childhood, I was always interested in dramatic stories. I loved that. My family was in films, so it is almost like that's the only place where I'm going to end up, because my liking for storytelling and my family being there in the industry, that's where I ended up. For a long time, where to start? Okay, India had this rich history of storytelling. Indians have a penchant for telling everything in a story. Even the deepest philosophies, they tell in story forms. So our biggest treasures are Mahabharata and Ramayana, the epics, and I grew upon them from my childhood. And of all the languages that are all the film fields in the country, Telugu films made more. Telugu film industry made more films on these epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and I liked them from my childhood because it had so much of action and drama. That is my main attraction point. So I thought if we can take the same, not the same story as it is, but if you can take the essence of what we had on this epics and translate it onto the screen, then Telugu films needn't be only for Telugu-speaking people. It can grow beyond that. So that's how I started doing. Slowly, it came to the film Bahubali, where it really crossed the borders, and then people started noticing, okay, India is not just about Bollywood. There are some other industries as well, and particularly about my field, which is the Telugu film industry.
So when you started off working, your initial probably the first half of your filmmaking career was, I would say, probably pretty firmly focused at the Telugu audience. So at what point did you actually realize, like you started in 2001 with your first film, right? So in what year or what time did you realize that there was that audience that you're talking about, like outside of the Telugu speaking diaspora, which is large? I mean, you have enough of an audience to sustain a bustling film industry. There are 75 million Telugu-speaking people around the world, and so that you could very well have made a career focusing on that audience, right? And many people do. So at what point did you decide that you were no longer going to limit yourself to those stories? Like, where did the switch turn where you thought you could tell bigger stories?
I don't think it is one particular point, but first of all, I always believed that. Right from my beginning of my career, I always believed we had the capacity to grow beyond the boundaries of language. The initial successes of my films gave me a little bit more scope to expand my horizon. With my film called Magadhira, when we finished writing the story, we thought this definitely has the capacity to go beyond the borders. At the time, for different reasons, my producer couldn't invest in going beyond the borders, but I thought, I have to do this, And my next film, Ega, and I definitely knew this has the best opportunity to go. This time, my producer was very ready to do that, and that's first time when I went beyond just the Telugu-speaking states. We went to Tamil, we went to Malayalam, we went to other states as well, which became successful, and which gave me more and more confidence to go beyond. And then came Bahubali, which went pan-India.
So speaking of the pan-India status, and Bahubali is probably credited as being the first pan-India success story, or one of the first pan-India success stories, where it released across the country in different languages, and people in the United States and Canada often don't understand that these films are playing here as well, because those are mainly in diaspora theaters, as Peter mentioned earlier. But by the time the second Bahubali came out, it made a tremendous amount of money and was very successful, right? So it's still the top grossing film in India, worldwide, I think worldwide of all time, and certainly in India, yes. Right? So with the success of that, were you looking towards a global audience at that point? Were you happy or just sort of aiming for the Indian audience still?
Extremely happy, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Why not? It's a silly question.
Like you were saying, we have Indians spread across the world, almost in every country. And when we make films, we particularly make films for the Indians, Indian diaspora in the other countries. Even Bahubali was the same. The additional mileage that we got for Bahubali was in Japan. Mm-hmm. It did good to an extent, and somehow, even though I believed my stories can go beyond the borders of my states, I never thought they will go beyond the borders of my people or the Indians. So when Bahubali did well in Japan, I thought, okay, maybe their sensibilities are closer. So I thought I should concentrate more on seeing how my films work in the eastern side of India. Never ever I expected RRR to do well with the Western audiences. I didn't even have an inclination towards that. And when RRR released and when I started getting the responses one by one, I thought, okay, maybe there are few. Then few went to hundreds went into thousands, and there were people, story writers, directors, critics, people from different fields talking highly about RRR. Then I realized something that I never knew about myself or my films. So even though I can't say that I know something, so I thought the sensibilities are different, but I came to know the sensibilities also can be similar between my way of storytelling and the Western way of storytelling. I'm still trying to understand, to be very, very frank. So I never expected. But a filmmaker a storyteller basically is very, very greedy. He wants more and more audiences, no doubt about that. And I would really look into it, no doubt about it.
So what were you surprised about when it came to the reactions to Triple R as you started to see those reactions coming in from Western audiences? Like, what were the things that you were not expecting for them to react to that were really striking a chord with those audiences?
Particularly the taste, at least that's what I perceived. The tastes of the Western audiences are more subtle in terms of drama, in terms of color, in terms of expression, everything. They're more subtle. My films are over the top. They speak loudly. The expressions are loud. Everything is, the colors are vibrant. Everything is louder. So I thought it wouldn't stick with them. So that was my first surprise. Story-wise, a good story will work across the globe. I know that. I'm pretty much sure about it. A good story is good story across all races, all languages, everything. Just that sensibilities, I was quite surprised that people who like subtle way of emotions really liked RRR, which is louder.
And I think part of that comes from the sincerity, the earnestness of the filmmaking, of the storytelling. We've read many times over the last several months people talking about the epic bromance in the film, the friendship between the two characters, and the fact that the film is not cynical at all. Everything is very, very clear. Is that kind of what you're speaking about in terms of having less subtlety?
No, I meant more in terms of expression.
Yeah.
For example, if you take the song "Natu Natu" in the film, you wouldn't expect that kind of song, that kind of dance, that kind of expression in any of the English films or the Western films. So automatically, it is my understanding that they wouldn't like that sort of expression. But when it's almost like unanimous, everyone who watched the film were definitely talking about the song and dance and the way the actors expressed throughout that sequence. So yes, that was really, really surprising for me, and of course, it's a happy surprise.
Yeah. So one of the great things about your work is that it speaks in one of the most universal languages that film has to offer, which is action. Action is demonstrative. It doesn't require dialogue. It doesn't require subtlety. It requires a purpose sometimes, and I think that's where you one of the areas that you really shine. So what are your influences? Where did your taste for action, or your thoughts, because the way that your action sequences are designed, going back as far as I've seen your films, which is many years back, what were you watching that sort of influenced the way you design and conceive of your action sequences?
I had a penchant for the action sequences right from my childhood, but when I started growing up and started seeing more and more action films, there are certain kind of sequences which really stuck with me. And at some point of time, I also started analyzing why I like certain action sequences more, and certain action sequences don't stay in my mind for so long, even though they are composed or choreographed or shot very well. Then I realized the base of a good action sequence is an emotion. Of course, purpose should be there, but also it should be emotional. For the character who is involved in that sequence, if the audience are rooting for him by that point, then you can take the action sequence to any level. My biggest influence in that aspect is Mel Gibson, Braveheart. I have seen that film many times. I really love the way he designs his action. All his action sequences are based on very strong emotions, and he really pushes the boundaries when it comes to the action, how he stretches the time, how he closes the time, how he takes it more than what a human being can do at that point of time, and how stylishly he does that. All because there is a very strong emotion at the base of those action sequences. There's a lot of influence on me, his style. Yeah, that I strongly believe and I strongly follow for all the action sequences in RRR or Bahubali, or all the action sequences. There is a very strong emotional drive for the principal character. That is why the audience connect to the sequences so well.
So one of the things that I've really enjoyed specifically about RRR is we do action films in the West, and they do crazy things all the time. But what is technically very impressive is that in your action sequences, not only are there emotional stakes, right? There's also very clear geography of the action, so you know where everyone is, you know where everyone's going, what their goal is at every point. So when you're designing these things or starting to put them together, like do you have storyboards that you create, or drawings that you create, or do you have a team that you work with that tries to plan out? Because your action sequences are 40 minutes long. Like they're not quick cuts. And it's, I only say that because I kind of wish they were 50 minutes long most of the time. But that process must be painstaking to get all of those shots lined up and planned to get exactly what you want out of them.
Yeah, it's long, it's painstaking, but it is beautiful at the same time. Yes, we do a lot of storyboarding. We do a lot of, the way I go forward is, once the action sequence is designed in my head, I see which is the most heroic moment. It might be 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever. The most heroic moment, and I sit with the concept artist first. So I ask him to get the concept artist right, concept art right, the exact way I want my hero to be, the atmosphere to be, or the side characters in which position, which expression they should be. I try to really nail the first one single frame properly. Once I get the body language of the actors, everything right, then I get my DOPs and get my art directors to come in and contribute to the color tones, to the other articles, how they should be. Most of the time in action, even the articles will be in action. So once I get that right, that will set the tone for the rest of the things. Then there will be a lot of storyboarding. Then there will be a lot of stunt choreography. I have my very good team of choreographers. I tell them to do what we call stunt whiz. Like pre-whiz, it's a stunt whiz where they choreograph the whole action sequence, and we edit that one. We shoot that one before the actors come in. And once it is locked, then we get the actors to practice their acts, and then we go for shooting. Yeah, it's a long process, but we really enjoy doing every bit of it.
Excellent. So one of the things that also is very interesting about RRR and its success is that it's begun to cross over from a kind of niche audience, which would be action film fans that were going to see this, into a more mainstream audience, thanks to the re-release over the summer, thanks to the release on Netflix, where it was widely available and incredibly successful. And that's tremendously unusual for a film that's not in the English language. So tell me, how do you feel about that crossing over from just being, for a specific small niche of fans to a more mainstream audience in a way that we usually only see with art house films or artier films? Like, how does that feel for you?
Like I said, it's still unbelievable. I can't still tell you why it's happening, how it's happening. I haven't completely figured it out, but the feeling obviously is fantastic. Yeah, like you said, the initial run of the film was over, and it did great numbers. We were quite happy with it, and when the plan came forward to re-release it, I was quite skeptical. I thought, okay, these guys are overthinking a bit. Okay, then
I'm these guys, by the way.
But okay, we lose nothing, and the enthusiasm with which the distributors went forward, I was really touched that there is so much of love from these guys for my film, But I really prayed that because of that enthusiasm, something should come out of it. Well, it came out of it, not just something. It is many things, and the way it went forward into the art, like I was saying, like not just the film fans, into the critics, into the directors, into the actors, into screenwriters. Everyone were tweeting about the film. And then I thought, okay, my distributors know more about my film than me. And then came the Netflix release, and 14 weeks straight in top 10. It never happened for any other film. So yeah, I'm absolutely happy.
Yeah. It's a great moment for popular cinema, I feel, because when we, as I mentioned, we talk about foreign films coming over and making an impact in the Western world, it is typically art house films. It's not usually action films. But you're at a sort of similar crossroads that we saw with Ang Lee and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon almost 20 years ago. And I feel like you're the next logical step in that evolution for audiences around the world. And one of the things that has sort of enabled you to create these over-the-top stories is embracing the opportunities that visual effects present to you before almost anyone in India did. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about where you started with visual effects, and then how you've used those to serve your stories in ways that are allowing you to tell bigger stories than you could have previously.
I think visual effects were always there in my head from a very long time. I was not the first person to make visual effects oriented films in India. There were pioneers before me. Particularly, I should talk about a producer called Mr. Shyam Prasad Reddy. He was the first guy who would introduce the modern visual effects he's a Telugu film producer, introduced to India. And when I saw his films, the way he was using the visual effects, it's not just to create a spectacle, it is to enhance the drama. That thing really stuck in my mind. And when I really started pushing the boundaries, and I had some fantastic visual effects supervisors, two of them, Mr. Kamal Kannan and Mr. Srinivas Mohan from India, and particularly Mr. Kamal Kannan, who took to me like a disciple, even though he was supervisor, even though I am the director. He used to teach me the nuances of the visual effects, how to use it, how to enhance, what are the programs, and how each section of visual effects work, which is the best practices, where you can break the line, where you can't break the line. He was teaching me a lot, and I was constantly applying that to my work. I was not afraid to fail. In the beginning of my career, some of the visual effects I did were quite tacky, but I still went ahead because unless we try and see, we would never know. Gradually, I got the knack of it, how to use them, how not to use them. But I make, like I was saying, how we use the emotion for the base of action sequences, the same way there should be an emotional push before that big visual effects shot comes. Now, otherwise it would just be a good visual effects. It won't connect to the audiences. I use the same formula even there.
It's also allowed you to do, speaking of RRR again, some of the most spectacular animal effects that we've ever seen on screen. And it's come to the point where I don't know if this is your intention or not, but at the opening of the film where it gives a laundry list of animals that were not harmed in this feature, that's become a point in theaters where people start cheering because if they've never seen the film before, they're like, what is going to happen here? And, you know, animals are a running theme, so you have a fondness for animals, right? Yeah. And that's always tremendously enjoyable to watch with a new audience. Having seen the film four times in a theater and another, God knows, 10 times at home, it always works out. It never doesn't surprise an audience to see that card. Now, when we talk about Indian films in the West, typically speaking, people think of filmmakers like Satyajit Ray or Ritwik Kathak, or the artier filmmakers. It's not so much that we hear names of popular film directors. And so how do you feel about being sort of a pioneer in that regard to being, now you're not necessarily playing on the same field as them, but you are at the same level of recognition in a lot of ways in the popular film world. So how does that change the way you sort of look at what you're going to be doing next?
One thing, I believe that at least now, that because Western audiences are liking my films, if I suddenly change my perspective and start thinking about how should I make a Western film now, I don't think that's going to work out. I have certain way of storytelling, and I need constantly I need to fine-tune myself. I should constantly be bettering myself, but that doesn't mean I completely change the way I'm narrating my stories. Then I wouldn't. It would be like traveling on two boats. You're on neither. So I think I should still stick to my way of storytelling, but I should better myself, and I also should keep in mind that I have more audiences to whom I can tell my story. But the essential thing there is it should be my story, not someone else's story. Then I wouldn't be going anywhere. You're giving me a big word, pioneer. I still don't know. I'm still in my nascent steps. So let's see. I'm thinking this is the way to go forward. So if this is successful, then probably then it will become a pioneering way of how to tell your stories to the world.
I mean, if this is the beginning, then we're all in for a lot of treats down the road. So let's see. When we talk about the way that your films are staged, the aspects of the film that people are responding to, what I found very interesting is that they are typically the things, as you mentioned, that we don't think of translating to a Western audience or to an audience outside of India. It's a very traditional way of Indian storytelling, coming from, the film industry started with stage production, and, the song, Natu Natu, has been a huge hit. The film is 3 hours long. It has an intermission. It has these unbelievable action sequences, which are all things that Western film fans have seen as deterrents for a very long time. Like, if we mention all these things out of context, they don't seem to connect the way they once did. So, you didn't expect to see the sort of response that you got? Like, what were you thinking about? Like, you're going to Japan, right, in a few weeks to release the film there. What are your thoughts about going out there? What do you expect to see? Because it's already been a global sensation, and there's been a delay between all of your films when they release in Japan. So what are you looking forward to for the future of the film?
Nothing short of a great success, definitely. I mean, in all my career, I never said my film is going to be a big success. I cannot say that because audience are the people who are going to decide it. I only say that, look, my film has this kind of action sequences, this kind of romance, this kind of emotion, and please come and watch the movie, and they will tell us ultimately whether they liked it or not. So I just keep my fingers crossed and hope for the best. Ideally, because it worked across the world, there is no reason why it shouldn't work in Japan. Only thing is I want it to work bigger and better.
Right. So this is our last question, then we'll go to the audience. I think it's a good way to go out. What's next for SS Rajamouli?
Yeah, I just started writing about 2-3 weeks back. A globe-trotting action adventure. Mahesh Babu, a Telugu superstar, is the hero of the film. So, yeah, bigger and better.
Bigger and better. That's what we want to hear. All right, we do have some time for questions from the audience. We have one over here.
Hi, sir. Thank you for coming here, making everyone proud. My question is regarding RRR. So, are you planning to direct 2 separate movies with Ram takes on British government and Junior India takes on Nizam government? Because in the end, that you left a hint such that Beam will take weapons along with him, right? So, is it a hint that he's going to take on British Nizam government? So, are you planning 2 separate movies with Beam and Ram?
You're talking about, am I planning to do sequels for the film?
Right.
At present, no. When I made RRR, I wanted to show the freedom fighters in much bigger way, like superheroes. So I had to select a period in their time where no history was written about them. So if I come to the place where they fought against the Nizam and where they fought against the British, that part of history is written. So I won't have enough room to play around with. So if I make a sequel, I need to find more fictitious time, and I need to make a different story. Maybe probably I had to take Ram and Beam to South Africa and make them fight there or something like that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Question over here.
Hi, Rajamouli garu. Canada వచ్చినందుకు చాలా సంతోషంగా ఉంది మీరు. I just said, like, we are very happy to see him in Canada. Sir, as you mentioned, like as a filmmaker, you want greedy to see more number of audience watching your film. So we are also greedy, sir, as an audience to see more number of films from you. So right from your first film till RRR, we have seen you better up, let it be cinematography or action choreography or the way of storytelling or the character arcs, improving as you make each and every film. When can we expect for your films to be equally better in pace in which you make your films? Because for each and every film you take these many years, and we are like always hoping for you to make films really quick so that we can see more number of films from you.
Yeah. yeah.
So it's not just the director that's greedy, it's the audience that's greedy as well.
Sir, just to add to my question, have you ever assessed like what factors are making you to make films so slowly? Or you tried where you can improve as you move forward?
Yeah, I'm really trying to, it might sound untrue, but I truly am trying to make films faster. In fact, if you consider the number of action sequences RRR had compared to Bahubali, they are much more complicated action sequence and many more action sequences. But we made RRR faster than Bahubali 2, but if you consider taking 1.5 years off because of COVID, then we shot it quite faster. I still think we can make it faster. I'll definitely try to do that.
We've got one down here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rajamouli. Thank you so much for being here at TIFF. And just a quick comment, for those of you who have not had the privilege to be familiar with this early work, you should watch a film called Ega, where pretty much a fly takes down an industrialist. So we've been seeing the nature of his grand storytelling since then, so thank you. My question is, when you write, and I know you do write with your father as well, Mr. Vijendra Prasad, who's a phenomenal writer, how are you able to keep the director outside the door of the writer, write your script, and almost have that sense of duality? Or is it like, as a writer, you're excited to write that, Mr. NTR throws an animal at a person, and the director comes in and says, what, now I have to have someone do VFX for this? How are you able to almost, do you have within yourself someone who's a writer and a director, or is it like a combined force that actually channels both the writing and the directing?
Actually, it is very difficult to differentiate between, at least for me, it is very difficult to differentiate between directing, writing, and screenplay writing. All of them overlap into each other. And for me, how it happens is like I was explaining, Josh, how I get my heroic movements for a particular action sequence. The same way I get my heroic movements for the film as well. And I have an innate sense of whether different kinds of heroic moments come together in one particular storyline or not. So, like you were saying, my father helps me in that. He creates that thread for those action sequences, and all of them come together. So it is, like I was saying, I don't separate them. So when writing itself, the direction already starts. So it's very difficult to separate them.
And do you have any advice for Indian, Canadian filmmakers, people who want to take our identity forward? What would be the advice? Do we stay to our roots, or do we redevelop our roots? What would be your advice?
Advice would be the same for any filmmaker, Indian filmmaker or Canadian filmmaker, anywhere in the world. You need to find a story that resonates with you, that you would really, really, really want to tell that story to the audiences. Then you also need to figure out who those audiences are. You can't always nail them. I didn't know that RRR had Western audiences, so we can't always nail them, but at least you should figure out, okay, these are the audiences that I'm at least targeting, and this is the story I want to tell, and you should, then you go all out. You should have story can be written anywhere, any place. There is no boundary to it. At least you should have some kind of framework where you can get your thoughts together and to make one one sense and one understanding.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
We have a question over here.
Thank you so much for coming. Bouncing off of the last question, I wanted to dive into the writing. So you've been writing for a long time. How has your methodology changed over the years? What kind of practices or styles do you have when maybe writing by hand, or what kind of setting or place that you write in, or how you keep your focus? Could you expand upon the writing and how that's developed for you as you've become more and more skilled in the years?
It hasn't changed much, pretty much the same from the time I started directing. But nowadays, I think from Iga, that I make sure that even though my father is writing, the story, I make sure that I write the story myself at the end of it, at the end of the discussion. I just put it on the paper myself. I write my lines. Those lines might be there, might not be there in the end film. But from beginning till end, I make sure that I put it on paper in my handwriting, completely from beginning till end. So that has really helped me to get a little bit more into the depth. And there is one more process that we follow that really helped me from Bahubali time, which we call character designing. We have a person who sits in front of us, and he starts grilling us with so many questions regarding each character. So he will start, even though, for example, if you take RRR, the story of Ram and Bhim is like between about 2 years of their age, in 26, 27, whatever age. But when this person sits in front of us and he starts asking us questions from their childhood. How was Bhim as a child, as a 5-year-old? What are his likes? What are his dislikes? What was he as a teenager? What are his likes and dislikes? Why his likes changed from this to here, from childhood to teenage, and teenage to adulthood? Why did he change? What are the reasons? No, the person will be having about 400, 500 questions to each character. And it's a very tiresome process. I, myself, my writer's team, the actor who is playing that character, we sit in front of the table, and it is like a questionnaire that if we don't answer it properly, we are not going to get the job. No, it is so sincere, so we put so much effort into it. But by the end of it, as a director myself, as an actor, he also gets a lot of understanding about how that actor behaves in a particular situation, because he knows the story of that character, that particular character, from the time of his birth to time of his death. So this process has helped me a lot.
Right over here.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure meeting and honor to meet you, Rajamouli sir.
Hey.
And I have a quick question to you. So everybody knows here, right, is that you play with emotions and you're strong with it, okay? So for example, in Sai movie, right, there's a beat called Pantam Nida Nada Sai. So that first it is used for the revenge, and at the end of the movie it is used for the, to win the movie, and that's how it is. And example, same thing goes in Vikramakudu.
Yeah.
Chintata Chita Chita, it goes in comedy, romance, and at the end it goes to kill the Amin. So how do you handle all these things in tunes, and how do you handle those emotions in the movie?
How do I handle it? I don't know. I mean, see, that's a formula that works many a time. So when usually a story starts a little bit light and progressively becomes more and more serious, most of the time, not just my films, many films. So when we create those lighter moments, if there are some actions, some dialogues, something that people gets connected with in a lighter vein, but we use it, the same thing, more strongly in the later, the connection for the audience is, it's a good moment, good feeling for the audiences. I don't consciously sit and now we should have a connecting movement from beginning till end. I don't work that way. Subconsciously it is there. If it works out, we put it. There are many times we think these kind of movements will work, and sometimes it feels we are just putting it for the sake of it. Then I just delete those things. It is not a very, very conscious decision. We know that works. If it happens organically, we keep it. Otherwise, we won't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a question back here.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Toronto. My name is Andrea. I'm a student at Toronto Film School. My question to you is that Indian audiences, especially South Indian audiences, are highly impressionable, especially when it comes to the characters and the actors that they see on the silver screen. To what extent do you think a filmmaker is responsible for the kind of impact, whether it be positive or negative, that their art has on their audiences?
I mean, responsibility apart, if you don't create those kind of impact on the audience, you're out of the job. No one is going to give you a next film. So responsibility apart, that is the part of the job that we have to do. Thank you.
Right over here.
Hi, good afternoon, Rajamouli sir. It's such an honor to hear you speak. Hi, Josh. Sir, I think one of the reasons that Bahubali 1 and 2 are some of my favorite films of all time, because of the fierce female warrior characters that you wrote in those films, played by Anushka and Ramya Krishnan ma'am. I'm just very curious to know, when you write and you cast those very strong female characters, what do you think about in these primarily still male-led films? And do you ever foresee yourself directing an epic with a female warrior in the lead?
Okay. For me, a character is a character, whether it doesn't matter whether it's a female or a male. I don't particularly sit and think in terms of, okay, let's put some strong female characters. I don't do that. In the course of storytelling, if that, to enhance that, the drama in the film or the story at that particular point if a strong character is needed, we'll bring in a strong character. It might be a female, it might be a male, it doesn't matter. So that's how I see it. For me, at some points, the characters being very, very strong enhances the emotion. Sometimes just putting a strong character without having any purpose will just make it superficial. No, we should be very, at least I'll be very conscious about making those decisions. Me making a movie with a strong warrior female as a lead, it depends at that particular point of time. I have many stories continuously going in my mind. Some of them have female characters as the lead. If you have heard about a warrior queen called Rani Abbaka from Mangalore, I had that in my mind for a long time. So likewise, I have some stories. There is one story, a modern story, modern day story thriller with a female lead. So I have some ideas in my mind, but at the starting of a new film, whichever idea comes, pops up the strongest, that story I'm going to make. Thank you.
In the back over here.
Like I said, sir, at the start of a particular project, out of numerous thoughts that go in my mind, whichever resonates strongest, that's going to come first. I don't know when Rani Abbaka is going to be the strongest.
For the last 3 years, I've been working on the story of Rani Abbaka.
Oh, there you go.
3 months back, the person who manages the Tulu Museum, his wife, he told me that he has handed over the subject to you now.
No one. It's not someone's, I don't think it's someone's property to hand it over, but no one has ever done that anyway.
We have one last question over here in the back.
Hey, so big fan over here. Before Bahubali was made, there were multiple attempts by, say, Mani sir or Kamal Haasan to make Ponniyin Selvan or Marudanayagam, but they were all shelved after the first few production, this one. But after Bahubali released, a lot of movies of similar tone is being made now. Even Mani sir is making Punnin Selvan, and Kamal Haasan is coming back with Mardanayagam again. So what changed after Bahubali that made Mani sir or Kamal Haasan do movies that they were dreaming of before Bahubali? I mean, like, what did Rajamouli do that Shankar or Kamal Haasan or Mani Ratnam were not able to crack the code before Bahubali released?
No, I can't take the credit for it. See, Bahubali is a successful film all across India, but it's not the first film to be successful all across India. The same Maniratnam sir made Roja and Bombay, which were highly successful, which he made them in Tamil language, and they were highly successful in Telugu and Hindi too. But no one followed up after that. Bahubali, what it made was like we were afraid to go beyond our market with the budgets. With Bahubali, we took that daring step. My producer took that daring step, and we went much beyond the market budgets, believing that the story can break the barriers of the market. And that gave confidence for many filmmakers that they can increase the budget. So once the big budgets are increased, there are many storylines which will come into that circle. So that's how people are experimenting more, bringing out more stories, which earlier people thought they couldn't make them because of the budget restrictions. Now they had the market had the confidence to move forward.
Hello.
Yes, please.
I have a mic here. The question is really about the marketing and distribution of your global successes. And we would like to request you, what are your impressions of accessing the Chinese market, which is probably the largest market in terms of screens as well as population, with the example of Amir Khan's Dangal, which made 400 million plus. So is your team, very talented team, how is it handling the Chinese territory for your product?
Like I said, sir, obviously I would want to go across the world, have more audiences. But how to do it, I don't get into those details. My team is there who really look into all possibilities of taking the film anywhere their audiences. Obviously, China is a big market, a lot of screens, a lot of people, a lot of requirement for the content is there. We are trying. It's not that we are not trying. We are trying to do that, but I don't know. I don't know. Along with me, many people are also trying. Probably one day, the whole world can crack the code of how to take films to China.
All right, that's it. We are out of time. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Rajamouli.